All right, we're going to start today with the definition of slope. So make sure you write this down. You should have these notes with you. So you shouldn't have to write it all down. You should just have to fill it in. Okay, so slope is the rate of change between any 2 points on a line. And it's also known as the steepness. Okay, so things with higher numbers are going to be steeper. So you might want to write that down somewhere. Higher numbers is steeper. Okay. Another important thing, that's why I left a little bit of room that I wanted you guys to write down, is that when you have those 2 points on your line, you're going to read it like a book. So you're going to go from the very left point to the right point. Okay? And we'll look at that on the next problem. Okay, so looking at the first one, we're going to start here. Now, the first thing that you're going to want to note every time that you look at a graph is your x and y axis. So there's our x-axis, and if we look here, our x's go by ones, okay? But if we go back over to our y's, those are very different. You see that those go by 2, okay? So when you look at your numbers, you're going to want to make sure that you know that. So what we always do is our distance between 2 points, I always call it rise over run. So I always think I have to wake up in the morning before I can go run, okay? So rise over run. So we're going to start here at our left point, okay? Start at the left point, and we're going to go to the right, okay? So we're going to start here, and that's not at 4, but it's right in between at 5. And we're going to go up 1, 2, 3, okay? So we're going up 3, so that's our rise, and then we're going to run, so we went up 3, and then remember our x-axis just goes by ones, so we're going to go over 1, okay? And we can simplify that, so it could just be 3. Okay, let's try that exact same thing with the next problem. So here's where we're starting at that point, and then there's where we're going to stop. So we're going to go rise over run. So we've got to get up, and then we can run. So here we go. I start here. It goes by ones on both the x and the y axis. They're going by ones. So I'm going to start here. I'm going up 1, up 2. So our rise is 2. And then I'm going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there is our slope, 2 over 5. Okay, I would like you to try the next one. Just give it a shot. Write down what you think the slope is going to be. Okay, hopefully you did your starting point here, and we're going to finish over here, okay? So we start here, and remember, both are going by ones. We look at our x and our y axis. They're both going by ones. So up 1, up 2. So our rise is 2, and then we're going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 over 6. Now, just like the first one, we can reduce that one. It's just kind of different because it's not going to be a whole number. It's still going to be a fraction. And you guys know that you can just figure out what you can divide both numbers by. So 2 divided by 2 gives us 1, and 6 divided by 2 gives us 3, and there's our slope. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the next one. The next one, there's something you're going to have to pay very close attention to, where our points are. There's our first point. It's on 4, -3. That's a good point. Then we're going to go up to the next point. It's right in the middle. It's not on an intersection. So we're going to have to go all the way up, and then you've got to look at that half. So let's go ahead and try that out. Okay, let's start here at our very leftmost point. I'm going to go up. I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and a half. Okay, so we just went up only 4 1/2. Now we're going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So our rise was 4.5 and our run is 6. Now I would just put that in a calculator. 4.5 divided by 6, you're going to get 3/4, or you can use 0.75. Okay, so for slope, it's just going to depend on what you like, and sometimes I would go with what they used, and here they used a decimal, so you might want to just stick with the decimal. Okay, I'm going to have you try the next one on your own, and then we will see if you got the same answer, okay? Okay, so on that last one, we went up 6 and over 3. So rise is 6, our run was 3, and 6 divided by 3, we got 2. All right, great job. Let's go ahead and go to the bottom. Okay, the first thing that we're going to want to look at for this problem is what things we're comparing. It says the table shows your earnings for babysitting. Graph the data, then find and interpret the slope of the line through the points. So we got to find the slope and figure out what it means. So if we look at the problem, here we have the number of hours, so we must be babysitting for a certain number of hours. And then over on the next line, we have that good stuff, the money, how much money we're going to make. Okay, so we're going to need to make a table for this first on the graph from the table. And we're going to want to label our graph because every good graph has labels. So the first thing I want to write is the title. And it says it's your earnings for babysitting. So, babysitting. And then we have our x-axis. Remember, this here is our x, and that's our y. So our x-axis should be labeled hours. And our y-axis should be earnings. Okay, the next thing we're going to have to worry about is what numbers we're going to go by for each of these. The only one that really concerns me, it doesn't concern me going to 10, but it concerns me going up here all the way to 50 because we don't have 50 lines. So let's start with going to 10. We'll go ahead and I'll try to write these as little as I can. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, just barely fit. Okay, so my earnings, I could do a couple things. I could go by 10s or I could go by 5s. Now, since if I go by 10s, I'm only going to go about halfway up, only to about here. I think the graph would look silly that way. So I think we're going to try to go by 5s. But again, we got to write small. So 5, 10, 15, and go ahead and continue labeling those. Okay, so there we have our labels. Now we can go ahead and we can graph our points. Now any one of these points here, you always have these coordinates and it goes x, y. Okay, so like our first coordinate, our x is 0 and our y is 0. So I would put a dot there. and we know that that's called the origin. Then our next point, our x is 2, and our y is 10. So you're going to go over to the 2 and up to the 10, okay? And we're going to go ahead and do that with all of the points. So 4 and 20 and so on. So go ahead and graph those points. Okay, after you graphed all those points, that is what you should have gotten. Now, if you look very carefully at it, and mine's not going to be perfect, but you can draw a straight line connecting those points. So that first tells us, and we discussed this the other day, number 1, it is proportional because it has that constant rate. Okay? And it also goes through the origin. Great. So that all answered the first question. We really didn't need to write that it was proportional, but I wanted to make sure that we understood that and remembered it. But here it says find and interpret the slope. We can choose any one of those points, okay? Any one of those, and we can start at the point. So I'm just going to choose to start at 0, 0 because that sounds easiest. So I'm going to go to 0, 0, and I'm going to go up from 0. I end up going up 10. I just rose 10, and then I run 2. So we have 10 over 2, which reduces to 5. But the bigger question is not really what the slope is, but what it means for the problem. So take a second, think about what you think it means. Okay, if you said that it meant that they made $5 per hour, that is correct. If you look at that, we did y was on top over x. Our y was our earnings, and then our x was our hours. So remember before, we talked about how that little fraction bar meant per. So we have $5 per hour. All right, great job. All right, so here on the next page, we're going to talk about babysitting again, but we're going to use a graph that's already made. Now, on your graph, you can't tell the different colors of the lines, but the good news is on here, you can see the different colors. So let's just go off of my graph, but still look at your graph because you'll be able to see it closer. Okay, it says the graph shows the amount you and your friend earn babysitting. So here you guys are comparing how much you make babysitting. You want to see who makes more money maybe. So for A, we're going to compare the steepness of the lines. What does this mean in the context of the problem? Well, if we're going to compare steepness, what I would consider when comparing steepness is which one would be harder for me to run up. Which line's going to be harder to run up, or maybe bicycle up? Which one's going to be harder? Now, granted, both of those are probably difficult for me to bicycle up. But if you look very carefully, this blue line here, your friend's line, is much harder to bicycle up. So the steepness of the lines. So you could say your friend's line is steeper. But what does that mean? So my friend's line is steeper. But think about what that means. Okay, so if you thought about it, you should see that your friend makes more money. Okay, great. And then for B, it says find and interpret the slope of the blue line. So we're going to go back to your friend's line, and we're going to see what it means. So start at one point, and then do your rise, and run, okay? So rise and run. So I rise from 28 to 56. So the difference between those, 56 minus 28, is 28 over, and then the difference, so you're running 4, so from 4 to 8, that is 4. So your slope is 7, but what does that mean? It means your friend makes $7 per hour. Okay, just for fun, I want you to do the green line, figure out how much money you make per hour. Okay, so it's 20 over 4, $5 per hour. You need to ask for a raise. Okay. The very last thing I'm going to show you is there is actually a formula that you can use, okay? So I'm going to explain it the best that I can. It's the change in y over the change in x, which is kind of what we've already been doing, but you've been doing it just by looking at the graph. We can also do this with just having points and not even looking at a graph. So the change in y, that's y sub 2 minus y sub 1. Okay, that's right here. And then here, x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So I'm going to explain that really quickly. So if you look at the very first one, remember we talked about how you had coordinates and one was an x and one was a y. Well, your first coordinate is x1, y1. And then your second coordinate is x2, y2. And I can't even tell you how long after I first learned this that I continued to do the x1, y1 on the top, so I remembered which one was which. So let's go ahead and try that. We're going to just plug them into the spots that they go in. So I'm first going to look for my y2. So here's my y2. That's going to go in my first position. So 3 over 2 minus, because it says minus, and then we're going to look for our y1, and here it is. So minus negative 3 over 2. Great, that's on top. Those are our y's. Now we're going to go look for our x's. So our x sub 2, because that's the first one, is 3 over 2 minus, and then we've got to find our x sub 1, and that's negative 3 over 2. And then we can do the math. Now, it shouldn't be too bad, but remember the first thing we have to do is keep, change for that subtraction. And since I did it on top, I'm also going to do that on bottom, so it's already done. And then go ahead, in your calculators you can do it, or you can just do it yourself. 3 over 2 plus 3 over 2. Now, if you did the math in your head, you're going to get 6 over 2, okay? And here we have 3 over 2 plus 3 over 2, so again, 6 over 2. Now, if you needed to go that extra step, or you did it in the calculator, so 6 over 2 is 3, and 6 over 2 again is 3. So that tells us that our slope is 1, okay? All right, so let's go back through that with a second problem. Okay, in this case, I just highlighted them like the same colors that we had up there. So I'm going to put my x1, y1, x2, y2, just so we remember. Okay, so our y2, negative 1 over 4 minus 5 over 2 over negative 1/2 minus 1. Okay, if it helps you, you can keep, change, keep, change, and then you can just plug them into your calculator now that you guys are able to use those. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll check our answers. Okay, so far, I went ahead and I did that, and I got a negative 11 over 4. And then I went ahead and did this, and I got negative 3 over 2. Now you're going to have to divide those. So in your calculator, you can put negative 11 over 4 divided by negative 3 over 2. And let's see if we get the same answer. All right, did you get the same answer? You've got negative 11 over 6. And I guess you could have turned that into a mixed fraction, but usually we'd want to leave it as an improper fraction. So if you did, you'd get negative 1 5/6. Okay? All right, wonderful job. Now what we're going to do is your homework is right there. So go ahead and make sure you get that completed for tomorrow. All right, and if you have any questions, please go ahead and feel free to email me. I will be available. Thank you.